The storm had been hammering the Texas Panhandle for 3 days straight, and on this particular night in 1878, it seemed hell-bent on tearing Jacob Thornfield's ranch house clean off its foundations. Lightning split the sky in jagged white veins, while thunder rolled across the endless grassland like artillery fire. The mesquite and yucca bent nearly horizontal under the assault, and the red mud had turned the cracked earth into a treacherous mire. Jacob sat by his fireplace, nursing a cup of coffee and listening to the wind slam against his shutters. At 43, he'd weathered plenty of storms in his 20 years on this land, but something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way his old cattle dog, Blue, kept pacing and whining at the door, or how the hair on his arm stood on end with each lightning strike. Then came the knock. At first, he thought it was just debris hitting the door, but it came again, weak, desperate, unmistakably human. Jacob set down his cup and grabbed his Winchester from above the mantel. In these parts, a knock in the night could mean anything from a lost traveler to bandits looking for easy prey. He cracked the door open, squinting against the driving rain, and his breath caught in his throat. A woman stood on his porch, or rather, swayed there like a ghost made flesh. Her dress hung in tatters, mud-caked and torn. Her left arm was wrapped in cloth dark with blood. Clutched tight against her chest, water streamed from her tangled hair, and her lips had turned a frightening shade of blue, but it was her eyes that struck him most wild and darting like a hunted animal's, filled with a terror that went beyond the storm. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Please help me." Jacob didn't hesitate. He pulled her inside, his strong arms catching her as her knees buckled. She weighed next to nothing, bird bones and desperation. He half carried her to the fire, settling her in his worn leather chair while Blue sniffed at her anxiously. "Easy now," he murmured, grabbing a blanket from the chest. "You're safe here." The woman's teeth chattered as she clutched the bloody cloth on her arm. "They can't find me here. They'll come looking. They always come looking." Jacob poured water from the kettle he kept warm by the fire, adding a splash of whiskey. "Who's looking for you, Miss?" She shook her head violently, water droplets flying. "No names, please, no names. Just let me rest a moment. I'll be gone before dawn." "You're not going anywhere in this storm," Jacob said firmly. He knelt beside her chair, his weathered face creased with concern. "That arm needs tending. Let me take a look." "No," she jerked back, pressing herself into the chair. "Don't take the cloth off. Please, you can't." The smell hit him then, not just blood, but something else. Infection, maybe worse. His years on the frontier had taught him to recognize that sweet, sick odor of flesh going bad. He watched her shiver, saw the fever-bright shine in her eyes, and knew that whatever was under that bandage needed attention now, not later. "Miss, I've doctored plenty of wounds out here. Cattle, horses, men too. That arm's going to turn septic if we don't clean it proper." He kept his voice low, soothing, the way he'd talk to a spooked mare. "I've got carbolic acid and clean bandages. Won't take but a minute." She looked at him then, really looked at him. In the firelight, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 25, with delicate features under all that dirt and fear. Something in his steady gray eyes must have decided her, because she slowly extended her arm. "Please, don't take the cloth off," she begged one last time, her voice breaking. But the rancher did, and started shaking. Under the filthy wrapping wasn't a cut or a bullet wound. It was a brand-angry red flesh raised in the shape of a T with a snake wrapped around it. The wound wept clear fluid at the edges where the burn had gone deep. Jacob had seen plenty of brands in his time, on cattle and horses, even on men during the war. But this was different. This was deliberate cruelty, a mark of ownership burned into human flesh. His hands trembled as he recognized the symbol. Everyone in 3 counties knew that mark. Thomas Blackwood, the man who ran the largest spread south of here, who had judges in his pocket and sheriffs on his payroll. The man whispered about in saloons and around campfires, whose business dealings went far beyond cattle and land. God Almighty. Jacob breathed. He forced his hands steady, forced himself to look at the woman Sarah. She'd finally whispered her name with calm he didn't feel. Blackwood did this to you. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Not just me. There are others. 12 of us in that cellar. I got out when lightning struck the main house, caused confusion. But the others... She grabbed his shirt with her good hand. I promised I'd come back for them. I promised. Jacob's mind raced. He'd heard the rumors. Of course, women disappearing from towns along the border, turning up in Mexico or not at all. He'd told himself it wasn't his business, that a man who kept his head down lived longer out here. But now, looking at this branded woman shaking in his chair, he felt something shift inside him. How many guards? He asked quietly. Sarah blinked at him. Surprised. 6, maybe 7. They rotate. Why? Because come morning, we're going to get those women out. He stood, his decision made. But first, we need to fix that arm. He worked quickly, cleaning the wound with whiskey while Sarah bit down on a piece of leather. The brand was deep but clean-edged, done with practiced cruelty. He applied carbolic acid, watching her face go white with pain, then wrapped it in clean cotton strips. The mark, she whispered when he was done. Everyone will know. Everyone will see what I am. What you are, Jacob said firmly, is a survivor. That mark doesn't define you any more than the brands on my cattle define them. She studied him in the firelight. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, listening to the storm rage outside. My sister, he said finally. Took by Comanches when she was 15. We got her back after 2 years, but folks in town, they weren't kind. Said she was ruined. Damaged goods. She couldn't take their whispers and stares. Hung herself in our barn when she was 18. He met Sarah's eyes. I was young and scared then. Didn't stand up for her like I should have. But I'm not young anymore, and I'll be damned if I'm going to be scared. Outside, the storm began to break, the thunder rolling away toward the east. Dawn was still hours off, but Jacob was already planning. He'd need help good men who could shoot straight and keep their mouths shut. He'd need to move fast before Blackwood realized where his escaped property had gone. Rest now, he told Sarah, adding another log to the fire. Come first light. We've got work to do. She caught his hand as he turned away. They're just girls. Some of them. The youngest is barely 16. If Blackwood sells them across the border. He won't, Jacob said, and there was iron in his voice now. I give you my word on that. As Sarah finally dozed in the chair, exhausted by pain and flight, Jacob cleaned his guns and watched the dying storm through his window. He'd built a quiet life here, staying out of other folks' troubles, but sometimes, he reckoned, trouble came knocking on your door in the middle of a storm, and a man had to decide what kind of man he was going to be. Looking at the small, fierce woman sleeping by his fire, her branded arm wrapped in clean white bandages, Jacob knew he'd already decided. Come morning, Thomas Blackwood was going to learn that some men still believed in justice, even in this hard land where might too often made right. The last thunder rumbled in the distance, and Jacob Thornfield began to plan a war. Dawn broke gray and reluctant over the Texas plains. The storm's fury spent, but its memory lingering in puddles that reflected the pewter sky. Jacob had been up all night, tending to Sarah's fever and planning what needed to be done. He'd changed her bandages twice, each time fighting down his anger at the cruel precision of that brand. Sarah woke with a start, her eyes wild until they focused on Jacob's calm face. How long? Few hours, he said, handing her a cup of strong coffee. Fever broke around 4. You need to eat something. She accepted the plate of biscuits and gravy gratefully, eating with the desperate efficiency of someone who'd gone too long without proper food. Between bites, she told him more about Blackwood's operation. The compound was 15 miles south, built like a fortress with high walls and guards who shot first and asked questions later. The women were kept in an underground cellar, brought up only when Blackwood had buyers visiting. "He calls it his special stock," Sarah said bitterly. "Like we're cattle to be sold at market." Jacob's jaw tightened. "Tell me about the guards. Everything you remember." She closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that place. "Miguel runs the night watch, cruel man with a scarred face. 3 men patrol the walls, 2 more by the main house. They change shifts every 4 hours. There's a bell they ring if there's trouble. Brings everyone running." "And Blackwood?" "He's usually in the main house. Drinks heavily at night. There's a safe in his study where he keeps his ledger's names of buyers, prices paid, destinations." Her voice dropped. "He showed them to me once, said I'd fetch a good price in Mexico City." Jacob made mental notes of everything. The more she talked, the clearer it became that this wasn't some half-planned operation. Blackwood had been running this trade for years, protected by his wealth and connections. Taking him down would require more than just freeing the women. They'd need evidence. Proof that even his bought judges couldn't ignore. "I need to get word to some men," Jacob said finally. "You'll be safe here. Blue will watch over you." Sarah grabbed his sleeve. "You can't go to the sheriff. Blackwood owns him." "I know exactly who I can trust," Jacob assured her. "Men who've had their own run-ins with Blackwood's type. Good men who remember what justice means." He saddled his horse as the sun climbed higher, the wet earth steaming in the growing heat. But before he could mount, Sarah appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of his blankets. "I want to come with you," she said. "Absolutely not. You need rest. Those girls trust me. When we go in, they'll need to see my face or they won't believe it's rescue and not just another trick." She stood straighter, and despite everything she'd been through, Jacob saw steel in her spine. "I didn't survive that hell just to hide while others fight my battle." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Can you ride?" "Born to it," she said with the ghost of a smile. They rode out together, Sarah wearing some of Jacob's spare clothes that hung loose on her small frame. She'd tucked her hair up under a hat, and from a distance, she could pass for a young ranch hand. The brand on her arm was hidden under long sleeves. But Jacob noticed how she kept touching the spot, as if reassuring herself it was covered. Their first stop was Marcus Webb's spread, 5 miles east. Marcus was a former Union soldier who'd lost his sister to border raiders 2 years back. He answered Jacob's knock with a rifle in hand, but his scarred face softened when he heard their story. "Count me in," he said simply. "I've got ammunition to spare and a score to settle with men who trade in human misery." Next came Tom Bradley, who wore a deputy's badge but answered to his conscience rather than the corrupt sheriff. He listened in grim silence as Sarah described the cellar, the chains, the women who'd given up hope of ever seeing freedom again. "I've been building a case against Blackwood for months," Tom admitted. "But witnesses disappear or suddenly forget what they saw. This we can't let stand." Pete Martinez they found at his favorite fishing spot, a grizzled tracker who knew every waterhole and hidden trail in 100 miles. His weathered face darkened as he listened. "I guided a wagon train through here last month," he said slowly. "Young woman went missing. Sheriff said she probably ran off with some cowboy, but her parents swore she'd never do that." He spat into the creek. "Now I know where she likely ended up." The last man they needed was Samuel Ross, and he was the hardest to convince. A freed slave who'd made a life for himself as a blacksmith. Samuel had learned to keep his head down and avoid trouble. But when Sarah rolled up her sleeve and showed him the brand, his massive hands clenched into fists. "Nobody should be marked like property," he said quietly. "Nobody should know what that feels like." He looked at Jacob. "What do you need from me?" "Your skill with locks." Jacob said, "And your ability to move quiet like. We go in at night, get the women out before raising the alarm." They gathered at Jacob's ranch as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Maps were drawn in the dirt, plans discussed and refined. Sarah provided crucial details, the routine of the guards, the layout of the compound, the hidden approach through a dry wash that would get them close to the walls. "The cellar door has 3 locks," she said. "Heavy ones. They check on them every few hours, so we'll have a window of maybe 2 hours between checks." "I can handle the locks," Samuel said, "but we'll need a distraction if things go sideways." "Leave that to me," Marcus said, patting his rifle. "I can make enough noise to wake the dead if needed." As they planned, Jacob noticed Sarah growing quieter, her face pale beneath the sunburned skin. The magnitude of what they were attempting was settling in. If they failed, Blackwood wouldn't just kill them, he'd make examples of them. "You can still stay here," Jacob told her quietly while the others studied the map. "No one would think less of you." She shook her head fiercely. "Lucy, she's only 16, taken from a church social in San Antonio. She cried every night for her mother. And Margaret, she has 2 little boys waiting for her in Amarillo. They think she's dead." Her voice cracked. "I told them I'd come back. I can't break that promise." That night, they made final preparations. Weapons were cleaned and loaded. Samuel gathered his tools. Pete studied the sky, reading the weather signs. "New moon tomorrow night," he announced. "Dark as the inside of a coffin. Good for what we need to do." Or good for getting shot by jumpy guards. Tom muttered. "Faith, deputy," Marcus said with a grim smile. "Sometimes the Lord provides darkness for those doing his work." Sarah helped Jacob prepare medical supplies, bandages, laudanum, anything they might need for injured women. As they worked side by side, she suddenly spoke. "What you said about your sister, I'm sorry." Jacob paused in his sorting. "Her name was Mary. Sweetest soul you'd ever meet. Used to bring home every stray animal she found." He smiled sadly. "After she came back, she tried so hard to be who she was before. But the town wouldn't let her. Every whisper, every turned back, every decent man who suddenly couldn't court her. It wore her down like water on stone." "Is that why you're doing this for Mary?" Jacob considered the question. "Partly, but mostly because it's right. Because someone needs to stand up and say, no more. Because if good men do nothing, evil wins," Sarah finished softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Sarah spoke again. "When this is over, what then, even if we get them out? Where will they go? Who'll take in women with our kind of past?" "One thing at a time," Jacob said. "First we get them free, then we figure out the rest. But I promise you this, no one gets turned away from my door. Not ever." The next morning brought final preparations. Each man knew his role. They would ride out at dusk, make camp at Skeleton Ridge, then approach on foot after midnight. Pete would lead them through the wash. Samuel would handle the locks while Tom and Marcus took out the perimeter guards. Jacob would coordinate the escape while Sarah gathered the women. "What about Blackwood?" Marcus asked. "If he gets in the way, I'll handle him," Jacob said flatly. "But the women come first. We're not there for revenge, we're there for rescue." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, the 6 riders set out from Jacob's ranch. Sarah rode beside him, her borrowed clothes and determination transforming her from victim to warrior. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "thank you for believing me, for not turning me away." "Thank you," Jacob replied, "for knocking on my door, for reminding me that there are still fights worth fighting." Behind them, the ranch house grew small in the distance. Ahead lay Blackwood's compound and a reckoning years in the making. The storm had passed, but another was brewing, one that would sweep through the corrupt foundations of Blackwood's empire and, God willing, wash it all away. As they rode into the gathering darkness, Jacob touched the rifle across his saddle and offered up a silent prayer, not for victory, but for the courage to see this through, no matter the cost, beside him. Sarah rode tall despite her pain, living proof that the human spirit could survive even the cruelest attempts to break it. The die was cast. Come midnight, they would discover whether justice could still prevail in this harsh land, or whether Thomas Blackwood's evil would claim more victims before the sun rose again. The war council at Jacob's ranch drew more than just the 5 men he'd initially gathered. Word had traveled, careful and quiet, to those who could be trusted. By evening, 2 more souls had joined their cause. First came Doc Harrison, a whiskey-weathered physician who'd been run out of San Antonio for treating Mexican families the same as whites. "Heard you might need someone who knows how to patch bullet holes," he said simply, setting down his medical bag. "I've seen what Blackwood's men leave behind. Count me in." Then arrived Rosa Martinez, Pete's niece, who could shoot better than most men and ride like the devil himself was chasing her. "Those women will need another woman with them," she said, brooking no argument. "Someone who understands. Besides, you'll need every gun you can get." Jacob watched the group assembled in his barn, lantern light casting long shadows on determined faces. Each person here had their reasons, their old wounds that Blackwood's cruelty had reopened. But concern gnawed at him. This wasn't the clean military operation he'd hoped for. Too many people meant too many chances for something to go wrong. "Listen up," he said, commanding their attention. "This isn't about revenge. Any man or woman who can't keep their head when the shooting starts needs to walk away now. Those girls in that cellar are counting on us to be smart, not just brave." Nobody moved. Tom Bradley spread out a rough map on a barrel. "I've been watching Blackwood's compound for weeks. Guards change at midnight, 4 in the morning, and 8. The midnight change is our best shot. They're tired from the evening shift, and the new guards take about 20 minutes to settle into routine. The compound's built like a fortress," Marcus added, tracing the walls with his finger. "Adobe walls, 10 feet high. Main gate's the only way in for horses and wagons, but Pete knows another way." Pete nodded, his weathered face grave. "Dry wash runs along the eastern wall. Flash floods cut it deep over the years. A man on foot can navigate it. Come up near the back of the compound where they store feed. Walls lower there, maybe 7 feet. That's our entry point." Jacob decided, "Samuel, Rosa, and Sarah come with me through the wash. We get to the cellar. Free the women. Tom and Marcus take position on the ridge with rifles. Cover our escape. Pete guides us in, then falls back to hold our horses ready. Doc stays with the horses too, ready for wounded." "What about the guards?" Rosa asked. "We go quiet as long as possible," Tom said. "I've got a badge might buy us a few seconds of confusion if we're spotted, but once the alarm's raised, then we fight our way out," Marcus finished grimly. Sarah had been quiet throughout the planning, but now she spoke up. "There's something else. Blackwood keeps documents in his study contracts, names of buyers, proof of what he's been doing. Without those, he'll just start again somewhere else." "One thing at a time," Jacob said. But Sarah shook her head. "No, those papers could free dozens more, prove which officials have been taking bribes. Lucy heard him talking. There's a whole network stretching down into Mexico. We stop him here. But what about the others?" The room fell silent. She was right, but it added another layer of danger to an already risky plan. "I'll get the documents," Samuel said quietly. "After I open the cellar, I know my way around a rich man's house. They never expect the help to be listening." Over the next 2 days, they drilled relentlessly. Hand signals were practiced until they became second nature. Sarah sketched the compound's layout over and over until everyone could navigate it blindfolded. They practiced moving in darkness, communicating without words. Rosa worked with Sarah on shooting. The branded woman had never held a gun before, but she learned with desperate determination. "You don't have to be a marksman," Rosa told her. "Just point and squeeze. Make noise. Make them take cover. That might be all the edge we need." The tension among the group was palpable. These weren't soldiers or lawmen, they were ordinary folk driven to extraordinary action. Jacob watched them prepare and felt the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. He was asking them to risk their lives for strangers, based on the word of a woman who'd shown up on his doorstep 3 nights ago. But then he'd catch sight of Sarah's brand when she rolled up her sleeves, or hear her crying out in her sleep from nightmares, and his resolve would harden. Some things were worth the risk. Tom used his position to gather intelligence, carefully questioning travelers and checking telegraph messages. "Blackwood's getting nervous," he reported. "He's added extra guards, posted rewards for a runaway. He knows Sarah's out there somewhere." "Good," Marcus said. "Nervous men make mistakes. Or they get trigger-happy." Pete countered. "We need to move soon, before he decides to cut his losses and move the women." They spent hours discussing contingencies. What if the guards had dogs? What if the women were too weak or scared to move quickly? What if Blackwood had moved them to another location for every problem? They tried to find a solution, but Jacob knew that no plan survived first contact with the enemy. Sarah proved invaluable in these sessions. She remembered details that seemed insignificant but could prove crucial: a squeaky hinge on the cellar door, a guard who always dozed during the late shift, the fact that Blackwood's office window could be jimmied with a thin blade. "You've got a good mind for this," Tom told her admiringly after she'd pointed out a flaw in their escape route. "When you're locked in a cellar with nothing to do but plan escape, you notice things," she replied quietly. The night before they were to move, Jacob found Sarah sitting on his porch, staring at the stars. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow-green, and she'd gained some weight, but the haunted look in her eyes remained. "Scared?" he asked, settling beside her. "Terrified?" she admitted. "Not of dying, of failing them, of getting this close and having to leave them behind again." "We won't leave anyone behind," Jacob promised. She turned to look at him. "Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's for your sister. This is about more than that." Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "My father was a preacher," he said finally. "Fire and brimstone type. But he had one sermon he'd give every few months, about the Good Samaritan, how the righteous men walked past the injured traveler, but the Samaritan stopped. He used to say that God puts broken people in our path not to test them, but to test us, to see if we'll walk by or stop to help." "And you stopped," Sarah said softly. "You knocked," Jacob corrected. "That's the hardest part, asking for help. After that, the choice was easy." They sat in comfortable silence until Sarah spoke again. "When this is over, I'll move on. Find somewhere new where nobody knows about this." She touched her branded arm. "You've done enough, more than enough." "You could stay," Jacob said carefully. "Ranch this size needs someone good with numbers. You mentioned you kept books before." Sarah smiled sadly. "A branded woman, working on a respectable ranch. You'd be ruined. The whole town would—" "Let them talk," Jacob interrupted. "I've spent too many years worrying about what folks think. Maybe it's time to worry about what's right instead." Before Sarah could respond, Rosa appeared in the doorway. "Best get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." The final preparations were made with grim efficiency. Weapons were loaded, horses saddled, supplies distributed. Each person knew their role, their route, their fallback positions. As the sun set on what could be their last peaceful evening, the group gathered for a final meal. Doc Harrison raised his glass of whiskey. "To foolish causes and the fools who fight for them." "To justice," Tom added. "To the women counting on us," Sarah said quietly. "To bringing everyone home safe," Jacob concluded. They drank, the whiskey burning away some of the fear. Outside, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. In a few hours, they would ride out to face whatever waited at Blackwood's compound. Some of them might not return. But looking around the table at these unlikely allies, a mix of broken souls and stubborn idealists, Jacob felt something he hadn't experienced in years' hope. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "I'm proud to ride with all of you. Now let's get some rest. We've got work to do." As the group dispersed to grab what sleep they could, Sarah lingered. "Jacob," she called softly, "that offer to stay. Ask me again when this is over. When those girls are free and Blackwood can't hurt anyone else? Ask me then." "I will," he promised. The moon was setting as they made final preparations. In the distance, coyotes howled their nightly chorus. Jacob checked his rifle one last time, said a prayer for courage and wisdom, and prepared to lead his unlikely army into battle. The die was cast. By dawn, they would either have struck a blow for justice or died trying. As they mounted up in the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah riding beside him once more, Jacob thought about his father's sermons and the choices that defined a man. Tonight, they would find out what kind of people they really were. Tonight, they would stop walking past and finally act. The compound waited 15 miles away, and with it, 11 souls praying for salvation. It was time to answer their prayers. The Texas landscape stretched before them like a vast canvas painted in shades of brown and gray. They rode in silence, each lost in private thoughts as their horses picked their way through the mesquite and prickly pear. The new moon offered no light, turning familiar landmarks into ghostly shadows. Pete led them off the main trail after the first hour, following paths invisible to anyone who hadn't spent decades reading the land's subtle signs. They moved single file through narrow passages between towering rock formations, the clip-clop of hooves muffled by centuries of accumulated sand. By midnight, they reached Skeleton Ridge, named for the sun-bleached bones of cattle that had perished in a long-ago drought. The ridge provided cover and a clear view of Blackwood's compound 2 miles distant. Pinpricks of light marked the guard posts and main buildings. "Lord Almighty," Marcus whispered, getting his first clear look at the fortress-like structure. "He's built himself a regular castle out here." Jacob studied the compound through his field glasses. The adobe walls gleamed pale in the starlight, broken only by the main gate and a few narrow windows. Guard towers rose at each corner, and he could make out the silhouettes of riflemen. "Having second thoughts?" Tom asked quietly. "No," Marcus replied. "Just taking its measure. David faced Goliath with a sling and stone. We've got better odds than that." They made cold camp, no fires that might give away their position. Sarah huddled close to Rosa, drawing comfort from the other woman's steady presence. The men checked weapons and synchronized their pocket watches by touch in the darkness. Pete returned from a scouting run, moving silent as smoke. "Wash is clear. Guards are keeping to their routine lazy from too many quiet nights. But there's something else." He paused. "Fresh wagon tracks leading in. Arrived maybe 6 hours ago." "Buyers," Sarah breathed, her face going pale. "Oh God, he's got buyers there." The group exchanged grim looks. This complicated things significantly. "Changes nothing." Jacob decided, "We stick to the plan. Maybe these buyers will provide extra distraction." At 1:30, they moved out. The horses were left with Doc Harrison in a sheltered grove, far enough away that any noise wouldn't carry. The assault team, Jacob, Sarah, Samuel, and Rosa followed Pete into the wash, while Tom and Marcus took position on the ridge. The wash was a nightmare of loose stones and sudden drops. They moved by feel, hands on the walls, placing each foot with agonizing care. Sarah's breathing quickened as memories of her escape flooded back the same suffocating darkness, the same desperate fear. Jacob's hand found hers in the darkness, steady and reassuring. She gripped it like a lifeline until her breathing calmed. Time lost meaning in the wash. It could have been minutes or hours before Pete finally held up a hand. Above them, the compound wall loomed. This close, they could hear voices carrying on the still air guards complaining about the heat, the boredom, the boss's foul mood. Pete produced a rope with a small grappling hook wrapped in cloth to muffle sound. It took 3 tries before it caught solidly. He tested it, then nodded to the others. Rosa went first, scaling the wall with practiced ease. She disappeared over the top. Then 2 tugs on the rope signaled all clear. Samuel followed, his massive frame moving with surprising grace. Sarah went next, Jacob boosting her up, trying not to think about how light she still was despite days of good meals. Jacob came last, hauling himself up and over. They crouched in the shadows of the feed shed, hearts pounding. The compound spread before them, main house to the west, barracks and storage buildings scattered around. And there, near the center, a low stone structure with a heavy wooden door. The cellar. But between them and their goal stood 2 guards, rifles casual in their hands as they shared a bottle of tequila. Samuel melted into the shadows, circling wide. Rosa knocked an arrow quieter than guns if things went wrong. They waited, muscles coiled tight, as Samuel worked his way behind the guards. A hand over the mouth, a swift strike, and one guard crumpled. The other spun, mouth opening to shout, but Rosa's arrow caught him in the shoulder. He went down with barely a gurgle, Samuel's hands finishing what the arrow started. "Go!" Jacob hissed. They sprinted across open ground, every second expecting shouts of alarm. But they reached the cellar door without incident. Samuel knelt by the locks, tools appearing in his hands. The first lock yielded quickly, but the second was stubborn. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, precious seconds ticking by. Sarah pressed against the door. "Lucy," she whispered. "Margaret, it's Sarah. We've come back for you." Muffled voices rose from below, confusion, hope, fear all mingled together. The second lock clicked open. Samuel attacked the third, muscles straining. This was the newest, the strongest. His pick slipped, and he cursed under his breath. "Hurry," Rosa urged, scanning the compound. "Someone's coming!" A door had opened in the main house. A figure stood silhouetted against lamplight, then started walking their way. "Almost got it," Samuel muttered. "Just a few more." The lock gave way. Jacob yanked the door open, revealing wooden steps descending into darkness. The smell that wafted up unwashed bodies. Fear, despair nearly drove him back. "Lucy," Sarah called, plunging down the steps. "It's me. We're getting you out." The cellar was worse than Jacob's worst imaginings. 11 women huddled against the walls, chains running from iron collars to rings set in stone. Some cried out at the sight of Sarah. Others cringed back, too broken to hope. "My God," Rosa breathed, then shook herself. "Samuel, the chains. Jacob, help me with the weak ones." They worked with desperate efficiency. Samuel's tools made quick work of the locks, while Sarah moved among the women, coaxing, encouraging, promising freedom. Lucy, barely 16 with hollow eyes that had seen too much, clung to Sarah like a drowning child. "Can they walk?" Jacob asked urgently. "We'll carry whoever can't," Sarah replied fiercely. "We're not leaving anyone." Margaret, an older woman with prematurely gray hair, struggled to her feet. "The buyers," she whispered. "They're taking Mary and Catherine tonight, already paid for them." Jacob's blood ran cold. 2 women were missing from the count. "Where?" he demanded. "Main house. Blackwood's showing them off like prize horses." Margaret's voice cracked. "We heard them screaming earlier." Jacob made a split-second decision. "Rosa, Sarah, get everyone to the wall. Samuel, with me. We're getting them all." "That's not the plan," Rosa started. "Plans change?" Jacob cut her off. "Go, now!" The women stumbled up the steps, some supported by others, all blinking in the starlight like moles emerging from the earth. Rosa took point while Sarah brought up the rear, whispering encouragement. Jacob and Samuel sprinted toward the main house, through a lit window. They could see Blackwood holding court with 2 well-dressed men, and there, Kneeling on the floor in torn dresses were two young women. "Kitchen door," Samuel whispered. "Servant's entrance. Less likely to be guarded." They circled the house, keeping to shadows. The kitchen door was indeed unguarded, probably because the cook staff had been dismissed for the evening's unsavory business. It opened to Samuel's ministrations with barely a whisper. Inside, they could hear voices from the front room, Blackwood's bourbon-smooth tones mixing with coarser laughter. "Gentlemen, I assure you, they're quite docile once properly trained. Observe." The sound of a slap echoed through the house, followed by a whimper. Jacob saw red. Only Samuel's restraining hand kept him from charging in guns blazing. They crept through darkened hallways, guided by voices and lamplight. At the study door, Jacob peered through the crack. Blackwood stood with his back to them, gesturing grandly at the two women. The buyers sat in leather chairs, cigars in hand, evaluating their potential purchases like livestock. "On three," Jacob mouthed to Samuel. The big man nodded, drawing his knife. "1, 2, 3. They burst through the door. Samuel's knife flew true, catching one buyer in the chest. Jacob's rifle butt connected with the other's temple before he could cry out. Blackwood spun, eyes widening in shock that quickly transformed to rage. "You—" He reached for the pistol at his hip. Jacob was faster. His fist connected with Blackwood's jaw, sending the man crashing into his desk. Papers scattered the precious documents Sarah had mentioned. "Get the women," Jacob ordered Samuel, who was already cutting their bonds. "I'll handle this." Blackwood struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. "You have no idea what you've done. I own this territory. The law, the judges." "The law's changing," Jacob said grimly. He grabbed a handful of documents, stuffing them inside his shirt. Contracts, names, addresses, evidence that would burn Blackwood's network to the ground. Blackwood lunged for his gun again. This time, Jacob didn't hesitate. His rifle spoke once, and Thomas Blackwood crumpled, clutching his chest. The terror of 3 counties gasped like a landed fish, eyes already glazing. "Judgment Day," Jacob told the dying man. "You should have prepared better." Samuel had the two women on their feet. They moved like sleepwalkers, shock rendering them mute. Jacob grabbed more papers, then froze at the sound of a bell clanging. "The alarm! Someone had discovered the bodies by the cellar." "Move!" They half-carried the women through the house as shouts erupted outside. The kitchen door burst open just as boots thundered on the front porch. The compound exploded into chaos. Muzzle flashes lit the night as Tom and Marcus opened fire from the ridge, keeping guards pinned down. Jacob's group ran flat out for the wall, the rescued women stumbling between them. Rosa had gotten the first group over and was coming back when they arrived. "Hurry!" They're organizing. It was a nightmare of rope and scrambling bodies. The week had to be literally hauled up and over. Bullets whined overhead. Chips of adobe stinging exposed skin. Lucy froze halfway up, paralyzed by terror, until Sarah climbed up beside her, talking her through each movement. Samuel lifted Margaret bodily, tossing her to waiting hands on the other side. One by one, they went over too slow. Always too slow. Guards were converging, dark shapes against the light from the building. "Last ones," Jacob shouted, boosting Catherine up. A bullet tugged at his shirt as he turned to cover their retreat. Then they were over, sliding down into the wash. Behind them, the bell continued its frantic pealing. They stumbled through darkness, following Pete's sure lead, while gunfire crackled above. The wash became a tunnel of terror and desperate flight. Women who had been chained for months stumbled over rocks, their legs weak from confinement. Sarah and Rosa supported Lucy between them while Samuel carried Margaret like a child. Behind them, the compound bell continued its frantic summons, and the sound of pursuing boots echoed off the wash walls. "Keep moving," Jacob urged, bringing up the rear with his rifle ready. A figure appeared at the wall top, silhouetted against the stars. Jacob fired, and the man tumbled backward with a cry. Pete led them through the twisting passage with uncanny skill, but their progress was agonizingly slow. Some of the women were barefoot, their feet bleeding on the sharp stones. Others gasped for breath, months of captivity having stolen their strength. Can't go on," one woman wheezed, collapsing against the wall. "Yes, you can," Sarah said fiercely, pulling her upright. "We didn't come this far to lose you now. Catherine, take her other arm. We do this together." They emerged from the wash to find Doc Harrison with the horses, his face grim. "Heard the bell. We need to ride hard." "They can't all ride," Rosa protested, gesturing at the weakened women. "Double up," Jacob ordered. "Strongest riders take the weakest with them. Doc, you got medical supplies ready?" "Ready as I'll ever be," the doctor replied, already assessing injuries by touch in the darkness. Tom and Marcus came sliding down from the ridge, rifles smoking. "Bought you some time," Marcus panted. "But they're mounting up. We've got maybe 10 minutes lead." They worked with frantic efficiency, boosting women onto horses. Sarah found herself mounted behind Jacob, her arms wrapped around his waist as much for emotional support as physical. Lucy rode with Rosa, clinging like a terrified child. The two women from the house were nearly catatonic, requiring constant support to stay mounted. "Where do we go?" Tom asked. "They'll expect us to head for town." "My place is too obvious." Jacob agreed. "Pete, that old line shack by Willow Springs, is it still standing?" Pete nodded. "Roof's half gone, but the walls are solid, spring's still good." "Then that's where we go. It's defendable, and they won't expect us to stop so close." They rode through the night like demons were chasing them, which, in a way, they were. The sound of pursuit faded as Pete led them through terrain that would challenge even experienced trackers in daylight. He took them through creek beds to hide their tracks, over rocky ridges where hoofprints wouldn't show, always choosing the path that would confuse and delay. The women rode in traumatized silence, freedom too new and fragile to be believed. Sarah found herself constantly looking back, expecting to see riders bearing down on them. The brand on her arm throbbed with phantom pain, reminding her of what they'd all escaped. Dawn was breaking when they reached the line shack, painting the dilapidated structure in shades of rose and gold. It sat in a small valley, surrounded by cottonwoods that whispered in the morning breeze. A clear spring bubbled nearby, and there was even an old corral, though half its posts had rotted away. "Get them inside," Doc Harrison ordered, immediately taking charge of the medical situation. "I need water boiled, clean cloth for bandages, and someone to help me examine these women." Rosa volunteered, her face set in hard lines as she helped Doc assess the damage. The stories told by bruises and scars made even the hardened physician pause. Sarah busied herself organizing the women, keeping her own memories at bay through action. Jacob and the men set up defensive positions. The shack's thick adobe walls would stop bullets, and the surrounding terrain offered good sight lines. If Blackwood's men came, they'd see them coming. "Found these on one of the guards," Samuel said quietly. "Producing a set of keys. Figured they might be useful." He also pulled out a leather pouch heavy with coins. "Payment for the women, I reckon. Seems fitting it should go to their care instead." Tom was studying the documents Jacob had grabbed. His face grew increasingly grim as he read. "Jesus Christ, Jacob, this is bigger than we thought. There are names here, judges, territorial officials, even a cavalry officer. Blackwood was just one link in a chain that stretches from here to Mexico City." "All the more reason to get this information to the right people," Jacob replied. "But first, we protect these women." Inside the shack, Doc Harrison worked with gentle efficiency. Most of the physical wounds would heal, he reported, though some of the women were malnourished to the point of serious concern. It was the invisible wounds that worried him more, the blank stares, the flinching at any sudden movement, the way some couldn't stop trembling despite the warm morning. "They'll need time," he told Jacob quietly. And safe places to heal. Some may have families to return to, but others— He shook his head. A woman marked by this kind of shame doesn't have many options in most towns. Then we make new options, Jacob said firmly. As the sun climbed higher, they maintained their watch. The women slowly began to eat the simple food they'd brought: hardtack and dried beef, as if remembering what it meant to choose when and what to eat. Sarah moved among them, a bridge between their old life and this new, uncertain freedom. "You came back," Lucy whispered, wonder in her young voice. "You really came back for us." "I promised," Sarah said simply, "and these good people made it possible." Margaret, the older woman, approached Jacob where he stood watch. Despite everything she'd endured, there was steel in her spine. "Mr. Thornfield, I heard what you did, shooting Blackwood. The law might not see it kindly." "The law hasn't been kind to any of you," Jacob replied. "I'll take my chances with judges who aren't on his payroll." "My husband sits on the Territorial Commission," Margaret said quietly. "He thinks I'm dead. Blackwood told me he sent word I'd been killed by Indians. When he learns the truth, when he sees these documents, there will be a reckoning." Hope flickered in Jacob's chest. Someone with political connections who'd believe their story, who had personal stakes in seeing justice done. It was more than he'd dared hope for. The attack came at midday, when the sun was brutal and vigilance had begun to lag. Pete spotted the dust cloud first riders approaching fast from the north. 6, maybe 7, he reported. "Coming hard." Positions," Jacob barked. The men scattered to their predetermined spots, while the women took shelter in the shack's most protected corner. Sarah grabbed the rifle Rosa had been teaching her to use, her jaw set with determination. The riders pulled up just outside rifle range, their horses lathered with sweat. Jacob recognized the lead man, Miguel, the scarred night guard Sarah had described. His face was twisted with rage. "You killed Mr. Blackwood," Miguel shouted. "You stole his property. Send them women out, and maybe we let some of you live." "These women are no one's property," Jacob shouted back. "And Blackwood got what men like him deserve. Turn around and ride away while you can." Miguel spat. "Brave words for a dead man. Boys, burn them out." The riders charged, guns blazing. Jacob's group returned fire, the crack of rifles sharp in the desert air. Marcus, the best shot among them, dropped one rider at 50 yards. Tom's badge glinted in the sun as he fired steadily, each shot carefully placed. But the attackers had experience and desperation on their side. They split up, trying to flank the shack. Samuel had to abandon his position to keep them from the spring. A thrown torch landed on the remnants of the roof, and smoke began to curl skyward. "The roof's catching!" Rosa yelled, firing through a window. Inside, the women huddled together, some praying, others simply staring with eyes that had seen too much. The smoke grew thicker, and Doc Harrison made the hard choice. "We have to get them out. They'll suffocate." It was Lucy who turned the tide, the 16-year-old girl who'd been catatonic just hours before, suddenly stood up. "No," she said, her voice clear and strong. "No more running, no more hiding." She grabbed a bucket and began attacking the flames with water from their supplies. Her courage sparked something in the others. Women who'd been victims moments before became fighters. They formed a bucket brigade, battling the fire while bullets whined overhead. Margaret tore strips from her skirt to bind a defender's wounded arm. Catherine and Mary, freed from the house just hours ago, reloaded rifles for the men with steady hands. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, just as Jacob's ammunition ran low, new gunfire erupted from the east. Riders appeared on the ridge, but these wore badges, and at their head rode a U.S. Marshal Jacob recognized from better days. "Federal Marshals," the lead rider bellowed. "Drop your weapons, all of you." Miguel's men, caught between two forces, tried to flee. They didn't get far. The marshals were fresh, their aim true, and they had the law's full weight behind them. In moments, it was over. Miguel lay dead in the dust, and his surviving men sat with hands raised. Marshal Ben Crawford dismounted, his weathered face grave as he surveyed the scene. "Got word from Tom's telegraph yesterday," he told Jacob. "Didn't quite believe it until now. Thomas Blackwood running a slave trade in my territory." He shook his head. "Should have looked closer. Should have listened to the rumors." "Better late than never," Tom said, emerging from cover. "We've got documents, testimony, everything you need to clean house." The marshal's expression hardened as he read through some of the papers. Mother of God. Half the territorial government's implicated. He looked at the women emerging from the smoky shack, saw their condition, the hope and fear warring in their eyes. "Ladies, you have the full protection of federal law. Any man who troubles you will answer to me personally." As the marshals secured prisoners and evidence, Sarah stood with Jacob, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The crisis was over, but the hard work of rebuilding lives was just beginning. "You did it," she said softly. "You brought us all home safe." "We did it," Jacob corrected. "Every one of us, even Lucy there, especially Lucy. Sometimes courage is contagious." The journey back to civilization felt different from their desperate flight. Marshal Crawford's presence meant safety, but it also meant facing the world beyond a world that might not be kind to women bearing the invisible and visible scars of captivity. Jacob rode alongside the wagon Doc Harrison had commandeered for the weakest, watching Sarah help tend to the others with quiet efficiency. "We'll make camp at Dusty Flats," Crawford announced as the sun touched the horizon. "There's a way station there, and I've sent word ahead for supplies and clothes fitting for ladies." Margaret rode up beside Jacob, sitting straight despite her exhaustion. "Mr. Thornfield, I need to send a telegram to my husband. He needs to know I'm alive before he hears it through rumors." "Crawford can arrange that," Jacob assured her. "Your testimony will carry weight, Mrs. Daniels. A commissioner's wife people will have to listen." "They'll listen," Margaret said grimly. "Or I'll know the reason why. My husband is a good man, but he's been blind to what's been happening under his nose. That ends now." The way station at Dusty Flats was a modest affair, adobe buildings around a well, run by an elderly couple named the Wheelers. Mrs. Wheeler took one look at the women and immediately took charge, shooing the men away while she organized baths, clean clothes, and hot meals. "Lord have mercy," she muttered, helping Lucy into a simple calico dress. "What kind of monsters? Well, never you mind, child. You're safe now." While the women recovered some semblance of normalcy, Crawford pulled Jacob and Tom aside. "This is going to be big," he said, gesturing at the stack of documents. "Bigger than you know. I've already sent word to Fort Worth. They're sending investigators, prosecutors, the works. But there's going to be pushback. Powerful men don't go down easy." "What do you need from us?" Tom asked. "Testimony, protection for the women until trial. And Jacob." Crawford's eyes were sympathetic but firm. "You killed Thomas Blackwood. Now, given the circumstances, I doubt any jury would convict. But you'll need to stand trial. It's the only way to make this stick legally." Jacob nodded. He'd known this was coming. "I'll stand trial, but these women need protection first. Some have nowhere to go." "I might have a solution for that." Rosa spoke up, joining them. "My aunt runs a boarding house in San Antonio. Respectable place. She's always looking for help, and she doesn't ask questions about the past. Some of these women have skills cooking, sewing, bookkeeping. They could start over there." Crawford nodded approvingly. "I'll arrange safe passage, military escort if needed." He looked at each of them in turn. "You all did a brave thing. Stupid, maybe, but brave. The territory owes you a debt." That evening, around the campfire, the rescued women began to share their stories. Each tale was a testament to survival, but also to the network of corruption that had allowed Blackwood to operate. Catherine had been taken from a stage stop. The driver paid to look the other way. Mary had answered an advertisement for household help, only to find herself imprisoned. Others had similar stories, all revealing a system designed to prey on the vulnerable. Sarah sat with Lucy, the young girl clinging to her like a lifeline. "What will you do now?" Lucy asked quietly. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "For so long, all I thought about was escape. Then rescue. I never planned for after." "You could come with us to San Antonio," Lucy suggested hopefully. "We could stay together." Sarah glanced across the fire at Jacob, who was deep in conversation with Samuel about ranch management. Maybe I have unfinished business here first." The next morning brought new challenges. A contingent of Texas Rangers arrived, led by Captain William Porter, a man whose name appeared in Blackwood's ledgers. The tension was immediate and palpable. "Marshal Crawford," Porter said with false courtesy. "Heard you had some trouble. We'll take over from here. This is a territorial matter." "Like hell," Crawford replied. "This involves federal crimes, kidnapping across state lines, conspiracy, corruption of federal officials. You'll stand down, Captain, or I'll arrest you for obstruction." Porter's hand moved toward his gun. His men shifted nervously. Jacob and his group tensed, ready for violence. But it was Margaret who diffused the situation, stepping forward with all the dignity of her social position. "Captain Porter," she said coolly, "I believe my husband, Commissioner Daniels, will be very interested to hear how you responded to the rescue of his wife. Very interested indeed." Porter's face went white. He clearly hadn't recognized her beneath the wear of captivity. "Mrs. Daniels. But we were told," Blackwood said. "Yes, I'm sure he did." Margaret cut him off. "Now, will you assist Marshal Crawford, or shall I include your name in my report to the territorial governor?" The Rangers retreated, but the confrontation highlighted the battles ahead. Blackwood was dead, but his network remained, wounded and dangerous like a snake with its head cut off. They reached the town of Millerton 2 days later. Word had already spread through telegraph, rumor, and the mysterious ways news travels in frontier towns. A crowd gathered as they rode in, faces mixing curiosity, sympathy, and judgment. "Whores," someone whispered, just loud enough to be heard. "Blackwood's whores." Sarah flinched, her hand moving involuntarily to her branded arm. Jacob moved his horse closer to hers, his presence a silent shield. But it was young Lucy who surprised everyone, lifting her chin and meeting the crowd's stares directly. "We are survivors," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "Nothing more, nothing less, and we will not be ashamed for what was done to us." The crowd parted, some faces showing respect, others confusion. Change, Jacob reflected, came slow to frontier towns, but it came nonetheless. Crawford commandeered the hotel, taking over an entire floor for security. "Ladies, you're under federal protection until this matter is resolved. Anyone bothers you, they answer to me." Over the next days, the machinery of justice ground into motion. Investigators arrived from Fort Worth and Austin. Depositions were taken, evidence cataloged. The women's testimonies painted a horrific picture of organized trafficking that reached into the highest levels of territorial government. Sarah proved invaluable, her memory for details and faces helping investigators map Blackwood's network. She worked tirelessly, driven by a need to see justice done for those who hadn't survived. Jacob watched her transform from victim to advocate, her strength emerging like steel tempered in fire. "You're quite a woman, Sarah Mitchell," he told her one evening as they reviewed documents together. She looked up at him, a small smile playing at her lips. "You're not so bad yourself." Jacob Thornfield, for a rancher who claims he just wanted a quiet life. "Maybe quiet isn't all it's made out to be," he replied. "Maybe some noise is worth making." Their eyes met and held, saying things words couldn't yet express. Too much had happened too fast, Too much healing was still needed, but something was building between them, slow and sure as sunrise. The breakthrough came when one of Blackwood's lieutenants, facing the noose, decided to talk. His testimony led to arrests across 3 states. Judges resigned in disgrace. Officials fled to Mexico. The network that had seemed invincible crumbled like a house of cards. But victory came with a price. 2 of the rescued women, too broken by their ordeal, took their own lives despite all efforts to help them. The news hit Sarah hard, bringing back memories of Jacob's sister. "We saved them from Blackwood." She wept in Jacob's arms. "But we couldn't save them from the memories." "You gave them a chance," Jacob said softly. "That's all anyone can do, give others a chance. What they do with it, that's their choice. But you gave them what Blackwood stole the freedom to choose." As the legal proceedings continued, decisions had to be made about the future. Margaret reunited with her husband, using her position to establish a foundation for women in need. Several of the younger women took Rosa up on her offer, heading to San Antonio for fresh starts. Others found courage to return to families who welcomed them with tears and open arms. But a few, like Sarah and Lucy, remained uncertain. The world they'd known before was closed to them. Marked women rarely found acceptance in polite society. Yet they were too strong now to accept anything less than respect. "I've been thinking," Jacob said one evening as he and Sarah watched the sunset from the hotel porch. "My ranch is big, too big for one man. I could use a partner, someone good with books, smart about business, someone who's proven they can handle whatever life throws at them." Sarah studied him carefully. "Is this pity, Jacob? Because I don't need." "It's not pity," he interrupted. "It's recognition. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. The ranch needs someone like you. I need someone like you. Not because of what happened to you, but because of who you are, despite it." She was quiet for a long moment. "The brand," she said finally. "People will see it. They'll know." "Let them," Jacob said firmly. "We'll build something new, something better, a place where the past matters less than the future, where women like Lucy can learn to be strong without shame, where survival is celebrated, not whispered about." Sarah looked at him, this weathered rancher who'd opened his door on a stormy night and changed everything. "Ask me again," she said softly, echoing her words from before. "When the trials are over, when justice is done, ask me then." "I will," Jacob promised. "And I'll keep asking until you say yes." As they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the day end and a new night begin, both knew that something fundamental had shifted. The Old West, where men like Blackwood could operate with impunity, was dying. A new West was being born, one where justice might be slow but was inexorable, where courage came in many forms, and where even the darkest night could end in dawn. The fight wasn't over. There would be trials, testimonies, and the long work of healing. But for now, for this moment, it was enough to sit together and know that they had stood against evil and won. Not a complete victory, perhaps, but a beginning. And in the West, beginnings were everything. The journey back to Jacob's ranch took on a different character than their desperate flight weeks earlier. The rescued women rode with dignity despite their exhaustion, no longer fugitives but survivors heading toward uncertain futures. Marshal Crawford had assigned 2 deputies to escort them, ensuring safe passage through territory still reeling from Blackwood's fall. Sarah rode beside Jacob, her posture straight despite the weariness that pulled at her bones. The brand on her arm ached in the heat, but she no longer clutched at it constantly. Lucy rode with Rosa just behind them, the young girl slowly emerging from her shell of trauma, asking questions about the landscape, the plants, the life that bloomed even in this harsh country. "Water ahead," Pete called from his position as scout. "Copperhead Creek's running high from the storms." They made camp by the creek as sunset painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. The women moved with practiced efficiency now, no longer the broken creatures who'd stumbled from Blackwood's cellar. Margaret organized the evening meal while Catherine and Mary gathered firewood. Small acts of autonomy, but Jacob recognized their importance. Each choice made freely was a brick in the wall of recovery. Doc Harrison checked his patience with satisfaction. "Remarkable," he told Jacob privately. "The human spirit's capacity for healing never ceases to amaze me, though some wounds—" He glanced meaningfully at Sarah. "Some wounds take longer than others." That night, coyotes howled in the distance, but the sound no longer made the women flinch. They'd faced worse predators than anything that howled in the dark. Around the campfire, tentative conversations bloomed. Mary spoke of her children waiting in Amarillo, wondering if they'd remember her. Catherine admitted she'd been a schoolteacher before, wondered if any town would hire her now. "Why not?" Margaret said firmly. "You're the same woman you were before, with the same skills, the same knowledge. What happened to you doesn't erase who you are." "Doesn't it?" Catherine asked softly. "When everyone knows, when they look at you and see only—" "Then we change how they look," Sarah interjected. "We tell our stories. We refuse to be ashamed of surviving." Jacob watched this exchange with growing admiration. These women were rewriting the rules of their world. One conversation at a time, in the flickering firelight. He caught Sarah's eye and saw his own thoughts reflected there: pride, hope, and something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A dust cloud on the horizon resolved into a small convoy wagons and riders approaching from the north. Pete rode back from scouting, his weathered face concerned. "Settlers," he reported. "Families, by the look of it. But Jacob, they're flying a white flag." The lead wagon stopped a respectful distance away. A woman climbed down, middle-aged, sun-worn, with the bearing of someone who'd carved a life from unforgiving land. She approached slowly, hands visible and empty. Mr. Thornfield," she called. "I'm Helen Morrison. We're from the valley settlements north of here. We've come to—" She paused, seeming to gather courage. "We've come to apologize, and to help, if you'll let us." Jacob exchanged glances with Sarah, then walked forward to meet her. "Ma'am?" Helen's eyes moved to the women by the campfire, lingering on their worn faces, their defensive postures. "We knew," she said simply. "God help us, we all knew something was wrong at Blackwood's place. Women disappearing, strange wagons at night. We knew, and we did nothing because we were afraid." Behind her, other settlers climbed from wagons, men removing their hats, women clutching baskets and bundles. "When we heard what you did," Helen continued, "what you risked to save these ladies, well, we figured the least we could do was try to make amends. We've brought supplies, clothes, medicines, and offers of work, for any who want it. Honest work, with people who won't judge." Sarah stepped forward, her voice carefully neutral. "Why should they trust you, you who looked away while they suffered?" Helen met her gaze steadily. "They shouldn't. Trust is earned, and we've done nothing to earn it. But maybe we can start." It was Lucy who broke the tension, moving forward with the unpredictable courage of youth. "What kind of work?" "My husband runs the mill," Helen said, relief evident in her voice. "We need someone who can read and figure. Too many men out here never learned their letters. The Johnsons need help with their store. The widow Palmer's been looking for someone to help with her dress shop." She paused. "We're not rich folks. Can't pay much, but it's honest work, and you'd be treated fair. That's all we can offer." Margaret took charge, as was becoming her habit. "Ladies, gather round. Let's hear what these people have to say. But remember, the choice is yours, always yours." What followed was a careful dance of negotiation and tentative trust-building. The settlers had clearly discussed this among themselves, prepared to offer what they could. It wasn't charity that would have been insulting. It was opportunity, presented with awkward but genuine respect. Catherine found herself in deep conversation with a young couple who ran the local school. "We need a teacher something fierce," the woman said. "The children are running wild. Someone with real education, who could teach them proper." Mary clutched a letter the settlers had brought her sister had been searching for her, had never given up hope. "She says the boys are well," Mary whispered, tears streaming. "They remember me. They want me to come home." As the day wore on, decisions began to crystallize. Some women would go with the settlers, taking the offered positions. Others would continue to San Antonio with Rosa. A few remained undecided, overwhelmed by suddenly having choices after so long without them. That evening, Jacob found Sarah sitting apart, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of fire. "You've been quiet," he observed, settling beside her. "Thinking," she replied, "about roads not taken, about who I was before." She touched her branded arm absently. "That woman feels like a stranger now. I'm not sure I'd even recognize her." "Maybe that's not all bad," Jacob suggested. "Maybe who you're becoming is worth more than who you were." Sarah turned to study him. "You really believe that people can change that fundamentally?" "I believe people can choose who they become," Jacob said. "Every day, with every decision, you chose to survive, chose to go back for the others. Choose now to help them heal. Those choices matter more than any mark someone else put on you." They sat in companionable silence until Sarah spoke again. "Lucy wants to stay with me. She's got no family left, nowhere else to go." "My ranch has plenty of room," Jacob said carefully. "And I meant what I said about needing a partner. Someone to handle the business side while I work the cattle. The offer stands for both of you, if you're willing." "The people in town will have to get used to it," Jacob interrupted. "Times are changing. Sarah, this whole territory's changing. We can be part of that change. Or we can let the past chain us forever. I know which I'd rather choose." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I've been keeping Blackwood's books in my head," she said finally. "Names, dates, transactions. There are more operations like his smaller, more careful, but still there. The marshals will need that information." "Then we make sure they get it." Jacob said, "We finish what we started." "It could take months, years, even, and I'll have to testify, publicly. Everyone will know exactly what I am, what was done to me, what you are." Jacob said firmly, "It's a survivor, a fighter, a woman who kept faith when faith seemed impossible. Let them know that, let them see what real strength looks like." Sarah smiled then, small but genuine. "You're a strange man, Jacob Thornfield. Most men would run from a woman with my past." "Most men are fools," Jacob replied. "Besides, I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm asking you to be my business partner, to help me build something worthwhile on that ranch. The rest, well, we'll see what grows." The next morning saw partings. Mary left with the settlers, clutching the letter from her sister and a small purse of traveling money the group had collected. Catherine accepted the teaching position, her head high despite the whispers she knew would come. Others made their choices, some for new starts in new places, some to return to old lives forever changed. Margaret pulled Jacob aside before her departure. "I'll be watching the trials," she said. "My husband has promised full support for the prosecution. But Jacob, be careful. Blackwood had friends, and cornered rats bite hardest." "We'll be ready," Jacob assured her. Lucy stood with Sarah and Jacob as the various groups departed. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked the girl one more time. "San Antonio might be easier." "I'm sure," Lucy said firmly. "You came back for me. Now I stay with you. That's what family does, isn't it?" Sarah pulled the girl into a fierce embrace, and over Lucy's head, her eyes met Jacob's. Family. An odd one, perhaps a branded woman, an orphaned girl, and a rancher who'd chosen justice over safety. But stranger families had been forged in this harsh land. As they prepared for the final leg to Jacob's ranch, Samuel approached. "Been thinking," the big man said. "If you need a foreman, someone to help work the place, well, I've got no pressing engagements." "You'd be welcome," Jacob said, clasping his hand. "More than welcome." Pete and Tom would continue with the marshals, helping track down the remnants of Blackwood's network. Doc Harrison was heading back to his practice, but promised to visit regularly. "Those ladies will need continuing care," he said. "And frankly, I'm curious to see what you all build out there." As their small party, Jacob, Sarah, Lucy, Samuel, and faithful Blue set out on the final stretch home. Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember: anticipation, not just for safety or rest, but for possibility, for the chance to build rather than simply survive. "Tell me about the ranch," Lucy asked Jacob eagerly. "Is it very big? Are there horses? Can I learn to ride properly?" As Jacob described his land, the rolling pastures, the clear streams, the mountains rising blue in the distance, Sarah watched the enthusiasm light up Lucy's face and felt her own carefully guarded heart crack open just a little wider. They were going home, not to the homes they'd lost or the lives that had been stolen, but to something new, something they would create together from the ashes of tragedy. And for the first time since that nightmare began, Sarah allowed herself to truly believe in tomorrow. The sun climbed higher, warming their faces as they rode toward whatever future they could forge in this land of second chances. Behind them lay Blackwood's fortress and all it represented. Ahead lay Jacob's ranch and the promise of a life defined not by what had been done to them, but by what they would choose to do next. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Jacob's ranch spread before them like a promised land, 5,000 acres of good grassland dotted with mesquite and oak, bisected by Sweetwater Creek that ran clear even in dry seasons. The main house sat on a rise, modest but solid, with a wide porch that faced the sunrise. Barns, corrals, and bunkhouses clustered nearby, all showing the careful maintenance of a man who valued what he'd built. "It's beautiful," Lucy breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the vista. "All this space to breathe." Sarah agreed softly. After weeks of town hotels and crowded wagons, the openness felt like freedom itself. Samuel surveyed the property with a practiced eye. "Good land," he pronounced. "Well managed, but I can see where extra hands would help. That eastern pasture needs clearing, and those fences—" He trailed off, already making mental notes. As they rode up to the house, the few ranch hands Jacob employed emerged from various tasks. Their expressions ranged from curious to wary as they took in the small group, particularly the women. Jacob dismounted and faced them squarely. "Boys, we've got new folks joining us," he announced. "Miss Sarah will be handling the books and business side. Miss Lucy will be helping where needed while she continues her education. Samuel here is our new foreman. I expect you'll treat them all with the same respect you'd show me. Any man who can't do that can collect his pay and ride on." Most of the hands nodded acceptance. They knew better than to question Jacob's decisions. But one, a weather-beaten cowboy named Hank, spat tobacco juice and spoke up. "Boss, with all respect, you sure about this bringing women here? After what happened, folks are gonna talk." "Let them," Jacob replied evenly. "Any man worried about talk is welcome to seek employment elsewhere." Hank studied Sarah for a long moment, taking in her straight spine and direct gaze. Something in her bearing seemed to decide him. He touched his hat brim. "Ma'am, Miss, welcome to the rocking tea." The transition wasn't without challenges. Sarah threw herself into learning the ranch's operations with fierce determination. But years of haphazard bookkeeping had left a tangled mess. She spent long evenings by lamplight, reconciling accounts and creating order from chaos. "You've been losing money on every cattle drive," she told Jacob one evening, showing him her carefully tabulated figures. "The buyers in Kansas have been shorting you for years. counting on you not checking their math too close. Jacob studied the numbers, whistling low. That's significant money. Money you'll get back next drive. Sarah said firmly, I'll be going with you. Let them try to cheat a woman who spent months memorizing Blackwood's crooked ledgers. Lucy adapted with the resilience of youth. She took to ranch life eagerly, learning to ride properly under Samuel's patient instruction, helping with chickens and garden, soaking up Sarah's lessons in mathematics and letters. The hands, initially uncertain how to treat her, soon accepted her as a sort of collective little sister. She's got grit, Samuel told Jacob one day, watching Lucy help wrestle a calf for branding. Whatever she went through didn't break her spirit. Children are stronger than we think. Jacob replied, sometimes they just need the chance to prove it. Word of their unconventional arrangement spread through the county like wildfire. Some visitors came with genuine business cattle buyers, merchants, neighbors needing help. Others came to gawk at Blackwood's women living openly on a respectable ranch. Sarah met them all with cool professionalism, her ledgers precise, her manner giving away nothing. The first real test came when Mrs. Adelaide Pemberton, the self-appointed moral guardian of the county, arrived with a delegation of town ladies. They swept onto the porch like a flock of disapproving crows, faces pinched with righteous concern. Mr. Thornfield, Adelaide began, ignoring Sarah entirely. We've come to express our concern about the irregular situation here. Surely you must see how inappropriate it is, having these unfortunate women in your home. Think of your reputation. Jacob leaned against the porch rail, his expression mild. I think of it often. Mrs. Pemberton. In fact, I believe my reputation has improved considerably since I started standing against those who traffic in human misery. Adelaide's face flushed. That's not what I meant, and you know it. These women are my business partners and guests. Jacob interrupted. Miss Mitchell has increased the ranch's efficiency by 30% in just 2 months. Miss Lucy is receiving the education she deserves. Both are welcome here as long as they choose to stay. But surely you must see, another woman began. What I see, Sarah said, stepping out of the house with Lucy beside her, are women who've never had to fight for their lives, judging those who have. She rolled up her sleeve deliberately, exposing the brand. Several ladies gasped. This mark was put on me by evil men, but I'm not ashamed of it anymore. It's proof I survived. Can any of you say the same? The delegation retreated in flustered disorder, but Sarah knew they'd be back in other forms, whispered gossip. Social exclusion, small cruelties designed to wound. She was right. Invitations that would normally come to a ranch of Jacob's standing dried up. Merchants suddenly found reasons to delay deliveries. The minister suggested, delicately, that perhaps the ladies might be more comfortable attending services at a different time than the regular congregation. We don't have to stay, Sarah told Jacob one evening after a particularly trying trip to town. Lucy and I, we could go to San Antonio, start fresh where nobody knows. Is that what you want? Jacob asked. Sarah considered. No, she admitted. I want to stay here. I want to build something, but not at the cost of destroying what you've already built. You're not destroying anything, Jacob said firmly. You're helping me build something better, something that matters. Let the whole county disapprove if they want. We'll outlast them. The work itself became their salvation. The ranch demanded constant attention, cattle to tend, horses to train, fences to mend, books to balance. Sarah discovered she had a gift for negotiation, driving hard bargains with suppliers and buyers alike. Lucy showed an aptitude for animal husbandry, raising orphaned calves and tending sick horses with gentle skill. Samuel proved invaluable, his quiet competence earning the respect of the other hands. Under his direction, the ranch's productivity increased markedly. Man knows his business, Hank admitted grudgingly. Don't matter what color he is when he can spot bloat in a steer from 50 yards. The evenings became Sarah's favorite time. After supper, she and Jacob would review the day's business while Lucy did her lessons nearby. Often Samuel would join them, contributing his insights about the ranch's operations. It felt like family, unconventional perhaps, but real. "I've been thinking about expansion," Sarah said one night, spreading out a map. "There's good grazing land to the south, and the owner's in financial trouble. If we could acquire it." "We?" Jacob asked, smiling slightly. Sarah flushed but held his gaze. "The ranch, the business, we—" "I like the sound of that," Jacob said. "Tell me more about this land." As Sarah outlined her plans, how they could increase the herd, improve breeding stock, maybe even experiment with different cattle breeds, Jacob watched her animated face and felt his heart constrict. This woman who'd arrived broken and terrified had become the beating heart of his ranch's transformation. The legal proceedings against Blackwood's network continued in fits and starts. Sarah made several trips to testify, always returning drained but determined. Each conviction was a victory, but the emotional toll was evident. "They made me describe everything," she told Jacob after one particularly harsh cross-examination. "Every detail, like they were trying to shame me into silence." "But you didn't stay silent," Jacob pointed out. "You spoke truth. That's what matters." One evening, a rider approached the ranch at sunset, a young woman, travel-worn and wary. She dismounted slowly, clearly exhausted. "I'm looking for Sarah Mitchell," she said. They said she helps women who've been—" She couldn't finish. Sarah emerged from the house, took one look at the woman's haunted eyes, and understood. "Come inside," she said gently. "You're safe here." The woman Julia had escaped from a smaller operation near the border. Sarah listened to her story, made arrangements for her care, connected her with Marshal Crawford's office. It was the beginning of something not planned, but necessary. "We can't take in everyone," Jacob said quietly after Julia had been settled in the bunkhouse. "No," Sarah agreed. "But we can help them find their way to those who can help. We can be a way station on the road to somewhere better." Word spread in whispers and careful messages. The Rocking T became known as a place where desperate women could find aid without judgment. Not many came. The need for secrecy was paramount, but those who did found practical help and directions to more permanent solutions. Mrs. Pemberton made one final attempt at moral intervention. Arriving with the minister in tow, "This has gone too far," she announced. "You're running a house of ill repute." "We're running a cattle ranch," Sarah corrected coolly. "One that happens to offer Christian charity to those in need. Isn't that what your Bible teaches, Reverend?" The minister, a younger man than his predecessor, shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes, but—" "Then surely you support our work," Sarah continued smoothly. "After all, Christ himself consorted with those society deemed unworthy." The Reverend left looking thoughtful. The next Sunday, his sermon was on Mary Magdalene and the power of redemption. Mrs. Pemberton was notably absent. As autumn painted the hills in shades of gold and rust, the ranch had settled into new rhythms. The hands had fully accepted the changes, some even becoming protective of their unusual outfit. Lucy had grown 2 inches and lost the haunted look in her eyes. Samuel had the ranch running smoother than it ever had. And Sarah had transformed from a frightened refugee into a formidable force. She still bore the physical and emotional scars of her ordeal, but they no longer defined her. She defined herself by her choices, her work, her fierce protection of those who needed it. "You've done something remarkable here," Jacob told her one evening as they watched the sunset from the porch. "This place, it's alive in a way it never was before." "We've done something remarkable," Sarah corrected. "All of us, together." They stood close, but not touching, the space between them charged with unspoken possibilities. The time wasn't right yet, too much healing still needed. Too much work still to be done. But something was building between them, patient and strong as the land itself. "Ask me again at Christmas," Sarah said suddenly. Jacob looked at her, understanding immediately. "I will," he promised. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lucy called them in for supper. The ranch house glowed with lamplight and warmth, filled with the voices of their unconventional family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more testimony, more battles with neighbors' prejudices, more souls seeking help. But tonight, there was peace. Tonight, there was home. And for women who'd thought never to have either again, it was more than enough. It was miraculous. The first snow of winter dusted the ranch as Marshal Crawford arrived with news that would reshape everything. Sarah met him at the door, noting his grave expression as she ushered him into Jacob's study, where maps and ledgers covered every surface. "The prosecutions are succeeding beyond our hopes," Crawford began, accepting coffee gratefully. 23 convictions so far, with more trials pending. But that's not why I'm here." He pulled out a thick envelope. "The territorial governor received this last week. It's from the Department of Justice in Washington." Jacob and Sarah exchanged glances as Crawford continued. "They're forming a special commission to investigate human trafficking throughout the territories. They want testimony from survivors who are willing to speak publicly. Sarah, they're specifically requesting you." Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her branded arm. "Washington?" "The hearings will be in Austin. But yes, federal prosecutors want to use what happened here as a model for breaking up similar operations." Crawford leaned forward. "Your testimony, combined with Blackwood's records, could change federal law. Give authorities the tools to fight this properly." "When?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Spring. The commission convenes in March." Crawford paused. "I won't lie to you, it'll be brutal. Public hearings and newspaper coverage. Your name and story spread across the territories. But it could save hundreds of women from what you endured." That evening, the ranch house felt smaller as they gathered around the kitchen table. Lucy, now 17 and growing into a confident young woman, spoke first. "You have to do it," she said firmly. "For the ones who didn't make it out. For the ones still trapped." Samuel nodded agreement. "Change comes hard in this country, but when it comes, it's because someone stood up and demanded it." Sarah looked at Jacob, who'd been quiet throughout the discussion. "What do you think?" "I think you already know what you're going to do," he said gently. "The question is, how can we support you through it?" Over the following weeks, letters arrived from across the territories. Margaret wrote from Austin, where her husband's reform efforts were bearing fruit. 3 territorial judges had resigned in disgrace, and new appointments were being made, men and women committed to justice. More surprising was a letter from Catherine. "Teaching at her small school, 7 of my students are girls who might have ended up in Blackwood's hands because of what you did. They're learning to read instead. Their futures are possible because of your courage." Other letters came too from women who'd found safety because of the network Sarah had helped establish. From lawmen who'd used the intelligence she'd provided to break up trafficking rings. From ordinary citizens moved to action by the story of the Rocking T's stand against evil. "You've already changed things," Jacob told Sarah one evening as she read through the correspondence. "This commission, it's just making it official." Christmas approached with unusual warmth for the season. The ranch hands had decorated the main house with pine boughs and red ribbons, while Lucy baked enough cookies to feed an army. It was their first real Christmas together as this strange, chosen family. On Christmas Eve, snow fell softly as neighbors began arriving. Not the judgmental delegation of months past, but the quietly supportive ranchers who defied social pressure to do business with the Rocking T. Townspeople who'd slipped Sarah information about women needing help. Even the young minister who'd preached redemption over condemnation. "Merry Christmas, Miss Sarah," Helen Morrison said, pressing a wrapped package into Sarah's hands. "It's not much, but we wanted you to know. Not everyone in the county thinks like Adelaide Pemberton." The gift was a finely embroidered shawl, the work of many hands. "For when you go to Austin," Helen explained, "so you'll know you carry our support with you." As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself watching Jacob move through the crowd, seeing how naturally he'd adapted to their expanded world. He caught her eye across the room and smiled, that slow, warm expression that made her heart race. Later, after the guests had departed and Lucy had retired, Sarah found Jacob on the porch despite the cold. The snow had stopped, leaving the world crystalline and silent under starlight. "It's Christmas," she said unnecessarily. "So it is," Jacob agreed, turning to face her. "Sarah Mitchell, would you consider becoming my business partner official-like, with papers drawn up and everything?" Sarah laughed. "Surprised? That's what you're asking." "For now," Jacob said, his eyes serious despite his light tone. "I figure we should do things in order. First business partners, then whatever comes next. But I want you to know you have a permanent place here, regardless. This is your home, your work, your life, no matter what." "Yes," Sarah said simply. "To the partnership, to all of it." Jacob reached into his pocket, producing a small leather box. It's not what you might think, not yet." He opened it to reveal a simple silver pin in the shape of a key. "It was my mother's. She used to say it symbolized opening new doors, new possibilities. I thought, for Austin." Sarah took the pin with trembling fingers. "It's perfect." She looked up at him. This man who'd offered shelter on a stormy night and had never stopped offering more safety. Purpose, partnership, possibly love. "Jacob, I know," he said softly. "When you're ready, I'll wait." The winter months passed in intense preparation. Sarah worked with lawyers, organizing testimony, preparing for the questions she'd face, the U.S. attorney assigned to the commission. A sharp woman named Eleanor Hartwood visited the ranch to coach Sarah on legal procedures. "They'll try to break you," Eleanor warned. "Defense attorneys, skeptics, those with vested interests in maintaining the status quo. They'll attack your character, your choices, your credibility." "I've faced worse," Sarah replied quietly. "Yes," Eleanor agreed. "You have. That's why your testimony matters." As March approached, the ranch bustled with activity. The spring cattle drive needed planning, but Jacob insisted Sarah's testimony took precedence. Samuel stepped up, essentially running the ranch while Jacob focused on supporting Sarah. Lucy, meanwhile, had received unexpected news. The Territorial Normal School had accepted her application for teacher training, contingent on a recommendation from a current teacher. Catherine had written a glowing letter, and the school was willing to overlook Lucy's unfortunate background, given her obvious intelligence and determination. "I want to teach," Lucy told Sarah. "I want to help girls like us have choices." "Then you will," Sarah said, hugging her fierce. "You'll be brilliant at it." The night before their departure for Austin, Sarah couldn't sleep. She found herself in Jacob's study, reviewing documents one final time. The brand on her arm ached phantom pain that came with stress. She rolled up her sleeve, studying the scar tissue in the lamplight. "Badge of honor," Jacob said from the doorway. She hadn't heard him approach. "Some days," Sarah admitted. "Other days it's just ugly." Jacob moved into the room, standing close but not touching. "Sarah, there's something I need to say before we leave. In Austin, you'll be exposed to scrutiny, public judgment. If at any point you need to distance yourself from the ranch, from me, to protect yourself." "Stop," Sarah interrupted. "Just stop. We're partners. Remember, in all things, I'm not running anymore. Jacob, not from the past, not from the future, not from this." She gestured between them. "All right then," Jacob said. "Partners." The journey to Austin took 5 days. Sarah, Jacob, Lucy, and Samuel made an unlikely procession, joined by Tom Bradley, who'd been called to testify about the law enforcement corruption he'd uncovered. The territorial capital bustled with more activity than any of them had seen politicians, lawyers, journalists, all converging for what newspapers were calling the trial of the territory's conscience. Eleanor Hartwood met them at their hotel. "The commission convenes tomorrow. Sarah, you're scheduled for the second day. Are you ready?" Sarah touched the key pin at her throat. She'd worn it every day since Christmas. "I'm ready." That evening, supporters gathered in the hotel dining room. Margaret was there with her husband, Commissioner Daniels, whose reform efforts had gained momentum. Several of the rescued women had come, Catherine, Mary, others who'd rebuilt their lives. Even Rosa had ridden in from San Antonio. "Whatever happens," Margaret said, raising her glass, "we've already won. We survived. We're here. We're speaking truth." But it was Lucy who offered the toast that resonated most. To the ones who opened doors when everyone else walked past. To the courage of knocking and the courage of answering. As they drank, Sarah caught Jacob's eye. Tomorrow would bring challenges, harsh questions, public scrutiny, the weight of representing all those who couldn't speak. But tonight, surrounded by this unlikely family forged in crisis, she felt something she'd never expected to feel again, whole. The commission hearings would last weeks. Sarah's testimony would indeed help reshape federal law, contributing to the creation of new statutes against human trafficking. The ripple effects would spread across the territories and beyond, touching lives Sarah would never know about. But that was tomorrow's victory. Tonight's was simpler, the warm press of Jacob's hand over hers. Lucy's excited chatter about teacher training, Samuel's quiet strength, the collective courage of survivors refusing to be silenced. "Ready?" Jacob asked quietly as the evening wound down. "Ready," Sarah confirmed, and for the first time in her life, she truly was, ready to speak, ready to be seen, ready to claim her place in a world that had tried to erase her. Tomorrow, she would tell her story to the commission, but tonight she was simply Sarah Mitchell, survivor, partner, and architect of her own future. It was, she thought, more than enough foundation on which to build a life. The stars over Austin shone bright and cold, but in the warm light of the hotel, hope burned brighter still. 5 years had passed since that stormy night when Sarah Mitchell knocked on Jacob Thornfield's door. The Texas landscape remained unchanged, vast, unforgiving, beautiful in its harshness, but everything else had transformed beyond recognition. The Rocking Tea Ranch had grown to encompass 8,000 acres. Its success built on Sarah's business acumen and Jacob's stockmanship. The main house had been expanded, with a proper office where Sarah managed not only their cattle operation but also a network of legitimate employment agencies that helped women transition to new lives. On this particular morning, Sarah stood on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The brand on her arm was now covered by an intricate tattoo, a phoenix rising from flames, done by a skilled artist in San Antonio who specialized in transforming scars into art. "You're up early?" Jacob said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. His hair had more gray now, but his eyes remained the same steady gray that had promised safety all those years ago. "Big day," Sarah replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "Lucy's coming home." Lucy had completed her teacher training with honors and spent 2 years teaching in Fort Worth. But she was returning to open a school in their county, the first integrated school that would accept children regardless of race, background, or their parents' reputations. "Nervous?" Jacob asked. "Proud," Sarah corrected. "That girl, young woman now, she's everything we hoped she could become." A rider approached from the east, kicking up dust in the morning light. As he drew closer, they recognized Tom Bradley. now wearing a Marshal's badge. "Morning, folks," Tom called, dismounting with practiced ease. "Thought you'd want to know we got the last one." Sarah's hand tightened on her coffee cup. "The last one?" "Rodriguez, down in Laredo, the final name from Blackwood's network. He's in custody, and with the evidence we have, he'll hang for sure." Tom's weathered face showed satisfaction. "It's over, Sarah. Really, truly over." Sarah felt something release in her chest, a tension she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. "All of them." "Every last one. The network's destroyed, root and branch. Your testimony, those records, they made it possible." After Tom left, Sarah and Jacob sat in companionable silence. So much had changed since her testimony before the federal commission. New laws had been passed, making human trafficking a federal crime with severe penalties. Law enforcement agencies had been reformed, corrupt officials rooted out. The trade hadn't been eliminated. Evil was too persistent for that, but it had been driven deep underground, its practitioners knowing that justice now had teeth. "Margaret wrote," Sarah said eventually, pulling a letter from her pocket. "The foundation has helped relocate over 200 women. She's opening a second shelter in San Antonio." "She's done good work," Jacob agreed. "You all have." "We all have," Sarah corrected gently. It was an old conversation between them, this question of credit and blame, survival and triumph. The sound of wagons drew their attention. A small convoy approached Lucy's return, but also something more. Sarah recognized several faces among the passengers. Catherine, still teaching but come to help Lucy establish the new school. Rosa, whose aunt's boarding house had become a model for rehabilitation programs. Even old Doc Harrison, finally retired but unable to resist seeing his girls again. Lucy jumped from the lead wagon before it fully stopped, running toward the porch with undignified enthusiasm. At 22, she was poised and educated, but in that moment, she was simply a daughter coming home. "Sarah, Jacob," she hugged them both fiercely. "I have so much to tell you." The reunion was joyful chaos. Stories were shared, plans discussed, memories both bitter and sweet revisited. Samuel emerged from the barn, his face splitting into a rare smile at the sight of the gathering. Even the ranch hands, many of them new but all carefully chosen for their open minds, joined the celebration. As the day progressed, Sarah found herself observing the scene with a sense of unreality. Here, where once she'd arrived broken and terrified, a community had grown. The Rocking T had become more than a ranch. It was a symbol of possibility, proof that people could choose to be better than their circumstances. That evening, they held a feast in the main house. The table groaned under the weight of food, and laughter filled rooms that had once echoed with planning for desperate rescues. Lucy regaled them with stories from Fort Worth, her eyes bright with purpose as she described her plans for the school. "We'll take anyone," she said firmly. "Mexican children, freed slaves' children, even the children of women like us. Education is the key to everything. If we can teach them to read, to think, to question, we can change the future." Catherine raised her glass. "To changing the future, one child at a time." As the evening wound down, Jacob drew Sarah aside. "Walk with me." They strolled toward the creek, the same path they'd walked countless times over the years. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and rose. "I've been thinking," Jacob began, then stopped, laughing at himself. "Lord, you'd think after 5 years I'd be better at this." "At what?" Sarah asked, though her heart was already racing. "At saying what needs saying." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Sarah Mitchell, you've been my partner in every way that matters. We've built something extraordinary together. But I'm greedy. I want more. I want to wake up beside you every morning, official-like. I want the world to know that you're not just my business partner, but my wife, if you'll have me." Sarah looked at this man who'd offered her shelter and never stopped offering more, who'd seen her at her lowest and helped her find her strength, who'd stood beside her through testimony and triumph, never wavering. "Yes," she said simply. "Of course, yes." Their wedding was held at the ranch on a perfect autumn day. Lucy stood as Sarah's maid of honor, radiant in her joy. Samuel was Jacob's best man, his usual stoicism cracking to show genuine emotion. The ceremony was performed by the young minister who'd chosen compassion over judgment, and the guests included survivors and supporters, lawmen and ranchers, all united in celebrating love born from the ashes of tragedy. Margaret, now a force in territorial politics alongside her husband, gave a toast that brought tears to many eyes. They say the West is hard country, and they're right. But it's also a place where people can reinvent themselves, where courage matters more than convention, where a knocked door can lead to revolution. To Sarah and Jacob, proof that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose. As the party continued under stars and lanterns, Sarah found a moment of quiet. The brand under her phoenix tattoo seemed to pulse with remembered pain, but it no longer defined her. She was Sarah Thornfield, now wife, businesswoman, advocate, survivor. The girl who'd fled Blackwood's compound would barely recognize the woman she'd become. "No regrets?" Jacob asked, joining her in her contemplation. "None," Sarah assured him. "How could I regret the path that led me here?" The years that followed brought their own challenges and triumphs. Lucy's school flourished despite initial resistance, producing students who would go on to become teachers, doctors, and leaders themselves. The employment network Sarah had established grew into a formal organization with chapters in 3 territories. The Rocking T prospered, becoming one of the most successful ranches in Texas. But perhaps the greatest victory was smaller, quieter the day Sarah realized she could hear thunder without flinching, could see a stranger approach without fear, could wear short sleeves without shame. Healing, she learned, wasn't a destination but a journey, one made possible by those who'd chosen to walk beside her. On the 10th anniversary of that fateful night, they held a gathering at the ranch. Women came from across the territories. Some Sarah recognized, many she didn't. They came to share their stories, to draw strength from each other, to prove that survival was not only possible, but could be transformed into triumph. As Sarah stood before them, preparing to speak, she thought of all the women who hadn't made it, who died in cellars and transit, whose names were lost to history. She spoke for them too, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. 10 years ago, I knocked on a door in a storm, and a good man answered. That single act of kindness rippled outward, touching lives across this territory and beyond. We cannot change what was done to us, but we can choose what we do next. We can choose to be voices for the voiceless, hope for the hopeless, proof that no brand, no scar, no past can define our futures. We are not victims. We are survivors. And together, we are unstoppable. The applause that followed echoed across the Texas plains, carrying a message of hope to any who had ears to hear in this hard land. Under these vast skies, redemption was possible. All it took was someone willing to open a door, and someone brave enough to walk through it. As the gathering continued into the night, Sarah stood with Jacob, Lucy, and Samuel, her chosen family, watching the constellation of lives that had been changed because one night, despite terror and pain, she'd found the courage to knock. "Please, don't take the cloth off," she had begged, but the rancher did, and started shaking. That moment of horrified recognition had shaken loose an avalanche of justice, compassion, and change that continued to reshape their world. The brand was still there, hidden beneath ink and art, but it no longer meant what Blackwood had intended. Now it meant survivor, fighter, phoenix. It meant that sometimes the darkest nights produced the brightest dawns. And in the vast, unforgiving beauty of the Texas frontier, under stars that had witnessed both cruelty and kindness, Sarah Thornfield finally, fully, understood what it meant to be free. Thank you for listening to this story from the Wild West. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, redemption, and the power of human kindness to overcome the darkest circumstances, please let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. We'd love to connect with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier stories that explore the struggles and triumphs of those who built the American West. Share your thoughts about Sarah and Jacob's journey in the comments. What touched you most about their story? Your engagement helps us bring more of these powerful historical narratives to life.